Radio VR in Washington, I'm Kate Zickel. I'm here at the Conservative Political Action Conference of 2014. Lots of people here. I've been speaking to several advocates, experts around the world, around the country. I'm speaking now with Marc Hyden. He's the National Advocacy Coordinator with conservatives concerned about the death penalty. Now, Marc, why are you here this week?
Well, I've always been a conservative. I'm only 30 years old, but since I've been able to vote, I've been very conservative, and I used to support the death penalty, and as a Southern conservative, I thought that was the right thing to do. But once I began to actually look at the facts surrounding it, that it violates many of the core concepts of conservatism. It's not pro-life because it runs a risk of killing innocent people. It's an undeniable risk. It's far more expensive than life without parole, so there's no case to be made to say that it's physically conservative. And in my personal opinion, it's not representative of a limited government because giving the government the power to kill U.S. citizens, in my opinion, that is not limited government. So once I finally came out against the death penalty and saw all the facts, I was happy to get involved, and here I am now with conservatives concerned about the death penalty.
Great. Well, Marc, a lot of people, as you mentioned, there has been some concern about the cost of life without parole versus the cost of execution. What have your numbers found in terms of the difference?
So each state is actually different when it comes to the cost, because each state operates it differently. But one of the most egregious case studies is what's going on in California. They've spent $4 billion on the death penalty program since 1976, and they've executed 13 people. So $4 billion, and what you've essentially got is 13 executions. I don't think that's exactly efficiency in government. Now, it's hard to give an exact dollar amount about how much more it is than life without parole, but it's widely understood that it's more because the initial trial, Colorado found this at least 6 times longer than a life without parole trial, with more experts, more motions, and a mountain of legal fees. And then you have the appeals process, which is much longer than any other appeals process in the criminal justice system. It's given what's called super due process. And it's so long that a lot of offenders actually die of old age while they wait on the death penalty. And then there's the cost of housing them on death row, which is more expensive than a maximum security prison in, say, general population. And the one difference between a death penalty case and a life without parole case is there's actually an additional trial that's mandated by the Supreme Court just to see if they can receive a death sentence. So that adds to the cost too. So on every level of the process, it's vastly more expensive than life without parole.
In your opinion, there's been a lot of discussion about the purpose of having someone incarcerated and the purpose of a prison. In your opinion, is the prison put together for the purpose of rehabilitation and getting someone back to being able to live in a normal society, or is it simply to keep them from getting out so that they don't harm other people?
That's a little bit more of a deeper philosophical issue. We mainly deal with the death penalty, but I can talk a little bit from my own personal experience with this work. It depends what kind of crime. If it's one that's going to be released, I think we should be having a rehabilitation discussion. But if it's a life without parole, they're in there to quote Frederick Bastiat, to prevent injustices from occurring by re-releasing them out to society where they may possibly murder again.
Understood. Now, I wanted to talk briefly about the recent 2-drug combo that's come out in Ohio. Dennis McGuire was that drug combination with pentobarbital for the first time. And as we all know, there was a lot of discussion and a lot of controversy about what the result of that execution was going to be and whether or not that execution method would be used again. Now, I've spoken to some of your colleagues and they've mentioned their thoughts on this, but in your opinion, is there a better option for states like Ohio who may no longer be able to use the original drugs that they were planning to use and are now feeling like they're kind of stuck trying to find out a better way other than this new 2-drug combo?
Well, and a lot of states are actually trying to figure out that problem, and it's because some European countries have decided they're not going to export the death penalty drug to the United States. So that's caused a lot of states to get, let's say, creative, and we've seen the fruits of that creativity has been what some people have called gruesome executions. I didn't witness it, thankfully, so I can't really speak to whether it's a cruel and unusual punishment. I think that's more subjective and opinion-based. But they're going to continue to do this. And I know my home state of Georgia, I love Georgia, I love being a Southerner, but they're trying to do the same thing. So to try to get around having to tell exactly what they have, they made it a state secret where they get the death penalty drugs. Now, conservatives are supposed to be champions of transparency in government, and making that a state secret, what they're using to kill people or where they're getting it, I don't think that's transparency. And I think the bigger question is not what drug they should switch to. They should be looking at a program that is not working in any way, shape, or form. It's failing victims' families, it doesn't deter crime, and you get it wrong, and it costs so much money on the taxpayers. So, I mean, I don't think it's what we should replace it with, it's just getting rid of it.
Now, ultimately, a lot of conservatives, especially folks here at this conference, tend to think that the death penalty is a good thing, something that is necessary to make sure that people in society stay safe and to make sure that there's an understanding that within the justice system that if you commit a crime, then there will be consequences to that. Have you found that it's a big battle to fight when you come to conferences like this and try to say, as a conservative, I don't believe in the death penalty?
Well, we actually debuted at the last CPAC last year here, and that was my first experience with this because I worked with the NRA before this, so I was used to conservatives just loving me. So I came in wondering if I was going to get tarred and feathered, and it was quite the opposite. Many people asked me, where have you been for so long? We're thankful for you being here. People hugged us and everything. So it's been an overwhelmingly positive response, and even the ones that are supportive, once they learn about some of the facts and all the drawbacks of the death penalty, they understand where we're coming from. And I think you're going to find more often than not the people at CPAC are very principled and they're very thoughtful about a lot of their ideology. So when you present it to them, I think it's just a matter of informing people of the facts. When they see it, it's not palatable.
Now, you mentioned some of the families of folks who have been executed in the past. Have you personally met with any of them, and what's your experience been like there?
We work with a lot of murder victims' family members and friends, and Pat Monks that's here actually had a close friend that was murdered. And what I found with many of them is they say the current system fails them. It's a decades-long process that re-traumatizes them through trials and appeals that it takes forever. And then the media is always covering. So they're rehashing all these painful memories. And in the end, the offender turns into a household name while the victim is almost always forgotten. It's just a harmful process, and it doesn't serve them. And I've heard non-murder victims' family members say that, the death penalty gives them closure. There's no such thing as closure when you have someone murdered like that. And a process like this is absolutely not going to give any closure. And I'd love to hear what Pat has to say.
There's no closure. I'd like to go back on a couple of issues. I think Marc, I'd like to go back. Marc had talked about California and its flawed system. In Texas, it's the exact opposite. It's becoming a fishing killing machine. But that's giving up the rights of the people. We have a case in Houston right now, and just to give you an example procedurally how we just step over things. Dwayne Buck, he's an African American. This case is pending. It has not been reversed. We had an expert witness testify on future dangers of society saying that he would go out and commit more egregious murders simply because he's a member. He's a minority, and minorities are more likely to kill. It's just sort of this sort of pop science that's allowed. In our state, it's easier to get convicted, and you have to work your way to get unconvicted. One of the groups of Murder Victims for Family Reconciliation, which is what Marc is talking about, is a group of family members who the loved ones have been killed, and they have come out against the death penalty because of the lack of closure. 87% of the cases are retried on a death penalty case, and these family members have to experience it. And there's nothing to address in the system, in the criminal justice system, about the family victims' members. The system doesn't address them at all. So, that's one of the lost groups that's been an ally to our movement to end the death penalty because, procedurally it's flawed. It'll always be flawed because human beings are flawed. So however you look at this from a religious basis, we don't even get that far, even though we have them as advocates, to make that argument. Our argument is cost. It is anti-conservative. It is not a partisan issue. In the state of Texas, the city of Dallas County is a democratically run county with a Democrat elected district attorney who's seeking most of the death penalties. In Harris County, we are Republican, and we didn't have one death penalty last year. In Ohio, Cuyahoga County, which is in Cleveland, Ohio, is a democratically run county, has more death penalty cases and death sentences come out of it than Hamilton County and Cincinnati, which is a heavily Republican county. So, no, it is not a partisan issue.
I actually met at the booth downstairs at 717. Someone came over and said, thank you for being here. I'm actually a murder victim's family member, and she had a family member that was murdered, and she vehemently opposes the death penalty. So we're having this discussion. I think there was a void in the conservative world where they weren't having this discussion, but now we are, and we're seeing that a lot of conservatives are getting on board. Dr. Ron Paul's endorsed us. Brent Bozell, he's from the Media Research Center. He's with us. Jay Sekulow. And we have a lot of the youth, too. Jeff Frazee, Julie Borowski, Austin Peterson. So we are building quite the coalition now, and a lot of people are open to having this discussion because they realize what it is. It's a broken government program that, when it gets it wrong, it makes the government no better than the offenders that it's trying to execute when it kills an innocent person.
Well, gentlemen, thank you both so much for joining me. That's Pat Monks and Marc Hyden. They're with conservatives concerned about the death penalty. Guys, thank you so much for addressing this very big, very controversial, and very important topic. I certainly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And for Radio VR in Washington, I'm Kate Zickel.